families pay for mental health services for children up to the age of 21 when income and insurance fall short of expensive interventions. Because a lot of mental health interventions, even the ones that are covered by insurance, are extraordinarily expensive. Now, we'll say that we focused more on the education and awareness piece of it in the last few years, and we're just moving into being able to have the funds to fund some initiatives for families. I have some rack cards up here that you can pick up at the end and see a little bit more about Beacon Tree Foundation. And I would really appreciate it if you would like our Facebook page, because we are almost at 900. And I'm so excited. So anyway, I wrote this story back in 2014. I had decided that I had had enough of silence, enough suffering and silence due to my child's mental illness and drug problems. So I took a deep breath and I put this story out there. And when I put this story out there, I was not aware of whether I was alone or not. I thought, you know, I just didn't know. And I put it out there and it got over 200 comments.
Wow.
For 1 year following that story, almost 2 years, I consistently got messages from parents saying, thank you for putting it out there. And that, in my head, started to form my mission. I was not alone. I kept hearing this statistic, 1 in 4 adults, 1 in 5 children, but until I saw the comments, I didn't know how real it was, because nobody was talking about this. So I felt alone, and I was suffering in silence. I wrote this in December. Actually, it took me 6 months. My child, Charles Rogers, died by suicide in June of 2015. And I started writing this in August. And let me tell you, it was agony to write it. Agony. But when it published, such a feeling of release. Like everybody says, writing isn't always fun. Finishing, having written, is fun. And then it published in February, and again, you get that feeling of, oh my God, what have I done? And all of a sudden, when I log in, I see that already it's had 8,000 shares the first day.
Wow.
It had a total of 23,000 shares. 23,000 shares. Over 500,000 views, and it is the #1 story for Richmond Times-Dispatch for 2016. I am not telling you that to say, oh, I'm a brilliant writer. I am telling you that to illustrate the number of families that are suffering from mental health issues. This can't go on. And I wanted people to know that I wasn't ashamed. That I wasn't ashamed of my child. I was proud of him. And we'll go through the slideshow and you'll see a little bit more about what I mean. This is a picture of Charles, and this is one of the happier days of his high school career. We didn't have a lot because he was really struggling at this time. And so were we, and especially so was I, because I'm a mom. But this is his theater teacher on the right. And that's Charles on the left, and he's homecoming prince, and he's on the homecoming court. Enormously popular child. I would say, if you ask his friends, they'd say he's the most popular kid in school. He was also the funniest. So the funniest, most popular kid in school died by suicide. That tells you that teenagers are masters at hiding their depression. Adults, we're not so good at it, but they are masters at it because they don't want anybody to know. They don't want anybody to see that blackness and that darkness in their soul, because that could equal rejection. And our children don't want to be rejected. This is him at the rap studio. Everybody thinks, oh, rap music is a bad influence. It's really not. This was his passion. He was actually just a poet. And that's what rap music is. It's poetry put to a beat. Yeah, there's crap rap out there, just like there's crap songs everywhere. But the real thing is soulful, real life stories. And that's what he liked to write, and he was a genius at it. And now that I have access to all his music, wow. But they had invested in him. Once they saw his music and listened to him sing and do it to a beat, they're like, we're all in. We're going with this guy. And they signed up a record deal, and he was actually working on one the week he died. And we just published one in October that he had finished and I didn't know about. So that was a nice gift for a mom to have. This is him in Wilderness. He didn't love it. But you don't send a child to Wilderness because you caught him with a joint and a beer. You send a child to Wilderness because you are desperate, because you have exhausted everything else in town, and that's the only thing you think will save your child's life. He ended up having a good experience in Wilderness because he got a sense of achievement. And he met some people there. In fact, one of the people he met was Cal. And it was a kid from his high school. And Kyle Riley also died by suicide 2 years before Charles did. So from Wilderness, he went to therapeutic boarding school. And from a therapeutic boarding school, he ended up going to high school in Utah. What happened at the therapeutic boarding school was something happened and the wheels started to fall off the bus, and we had to change his placement. And you have to like go in and change it like overnight. So he ended up going to school out in Utah called Wasatch Academy. And he actually loved it there. I love that school. Super expensive. No, we're not in that bracket that we can afford a school like that. And there is no funding and no help. So guess what? It's our home equity loan. And all in all, we spent $260,000 on treatment. So when it came to those last days, when I really feel like he needed to be in rehab, we had no more money left. And I don't think anybody realized, despite how much I told them, how dire our circumstances were. I mean, nobody has a bake sale for you if you have a child within a mental health facility or rehab, right? I mean, if you got cancer or brain tumor, but it's every bit as deadly. Why are we treating this differently? Because we don't understand it, and that's part of it. He won this in Utah, for the state of Utah. And I'm going to read you something his teacher said. So this was an award for being a stand-up comedian. And it just kills me that he didn't tell me he was doing it. He always told me afterwards, "Oh, Mom, I won this medal," and then, he was off, and I'm like, "You won for the state?" And then I'm like, "Well, what'd you do?" "I don't know." "What'd you do?" "I don't know." I mean, he never planned anything. He just got up there and did it. He was the only child ever to enter that contest with his own material. And not only was it his own material, he couldn't even tell me what that material was. So I wanted to share, I brought a group of comedy class students to Cedar City, Utah, where a professional group of improvisers graciously allowed us to perform with them. Charles was amazing, and they were so impressed. As we were leaving, Charles said to me, "That was the best weekend I ever had." He was truly in his element, and it was one of those moments that make my life worthwhile. I did a production of Alice in Wonderland and cast him as the caterpillar. At first, I was trying to direct him in this way or that, and then one day it occurred to me, just let him do it his way. It was stunning, and everyone in the room knew they were in the presence of creative genius. We took this piece to regional and state drama competition, and Charles also entered a humorous monologue of his own invention. He became an instant sensation at the competition. Girls were following him everywhere, and we all felt like we had brought Elvis to a kindergarten picnic. It was fantastic, and we were all thrilled. Though I only knew him briefly while he was at Wasatch, I feel I got to know and experience him in all of his glory, and I will never forget him. That was such a sweet note for her to take that time to write that. He did graduate from Wasatch Academy. And those of you who have a child with a disability know what an enormous accomplishment this is and how much hard work. And talking to teachers over the years, you know how hard this is. And it is. And what I also would like to point out to you is those children who struggle with autism or ADHD or something else also need your time and attention. We as parents don't always ask about those children because they don't have the soccer scholarship. And what we miss out on is the opportunity to learn from each other how we deal with difficult circumstances. We need to talk and reach out more. I don't want a mother to ever suffer like we did with the lack of emotional support. I was cut off mid-sentence when I would talk about Charles, and then before he was dead, they treated him like he was dead because he was a troubled teen. That's not fair. And so I got the message loud and clear. Nobody wants to hear you. This is one excerpt from a song he wrote. It's like I'm surrounded by walls with no escape at all. I'm over 6 feet tall. I've never felt so small. Children who suffer from depression, this is how they feel. And I think he really summed it up really well in that sentence. June of 2015, he died by suicide. And what I found out is that at this point, I couldn't talk about it before, and then memorial service, people talked about him in the week they came to the house, but then after that, they didn't mention his name. You know, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. He's still alive here. He was my child for 20 years. I would see people, they would avoid the subject. They would avoid me. I'm going to the grocery store, and people are kind of like skirting around the aisles so they don't run into me. I mean, as much as we suffered, really, I can tell you right now, I know it's awkwardness, but if you see a parent that's lost a child, just hit it head on. It's okay to say, I don't know what to say. I feel for you. That's all right. It can be cliche stuff, but say something. Saying nothing is the worst thing you can say, if that makes any sense. So, why did he kill himself? A lot of parents ponder this question. A lot of people who have a spouse or a father that died by suicide might also ponder this. But the why for me is written in all those notebooks. I saw how much that child struggled, and I saw how much he suffered. And that answered the why to me. Once I read that, it came very clear why he did what he did. And by the way, it was a death by hanging, which I found particularly disturbing. I mean, nothing prepares you for that shock. Nothing in this world. And nothing feels like your child has been erased, like not mentioning him at all. Like I said before, you've got to talk about it. I didn't erase him from my family tree. He's still there, and he's still here. And I've got to carry on his legacy, because I think one of the gifts, his greatest gifts, is that he made other people feel like they mattered. And I don't think that many people have that gift, and he did. So I'm proud to have been his mother. I'm not ashamed how he died. I'm not ashamed that he was addicted to heroin in the last few months of his life. I'm not ashamed that he suffered from depression and anxiety, because those are illnesses. They are not moral choices. They are illnesses. And until I read those notebooks, I had no idea how much he was struggling. The problem is nobody is talking about suicide and nobody's talking about depression, particularly the word suicide. Everybody wants to avoid that word, take their own life. I'm not. I'm using the word suicide. It's used in the title of my presentation. I use it on my blog. I use it because my friends now have just gotten used to it. Because we need to start having a conversation with our children about suicide. We don't need to avoid it and sugarcoat it, because they want to talk. Because when I look at my blog statistics, I thought I was talking to people like you. Mary Washington, University of Virginia, JMU, University of North Carolina, couple in England, one in Taiwan, California, Oregon, colleges from all over the US logging in to read what I say on my blog. I had no idea I was reaching that particular market. And that's kind of marketing talk, isn't it? So what has our silence done? It's given suicide a promotion to the number 2 cause of death for 10 to 24-year-olds. Number two cause of death on college campuses across the United States. That is a scary statistic. And if we do not start talking, it will get another promotion. Latest statistic, girls who used to have more attempts and didn't succeed are now succeeding, including starting at the age of 11. The statistics have taken a marked jump, which is very alarming. So I think we need to start to pay attention to why this might be. So how do you know when somebody's in trouble? Now this part is not very super comprehensive because I'm not a licensed clinical social worker. And I got this information from a website where they are. And I have all these resources on my blog on the right-hand column. And how do you know when somebody is in trouble? Here's some of the phrases they say, and this is just a few of them. I've tried everything, nothing's ever going to change. I just feel like dying. If I died tomorrow, no one would notice. And isolated, you can think, okay, I can see that. But lots of times these are buried in a text or a phone conversation. So when you go back later after it's happened, you can see it. But you can't always see it when you're listening to it. But I've talked to enough parents that felt that despair and felt that red flag and didn't know what to connect with it. And I'm hoping by educating that maybe you make that connection if you have the opportunity to do so. Giving away prized possessions is another sign that somebody is contemplating suicide. And I'll give you an example. There was a dad recently, I went to, one of the sport groups I went to was at Grief Circle. And they had a fundraiser and a walk. And there's a dad there, and I've seen his wife at a lot of the mental health events I go to because she's very involved in the community. But it's the first time I met him. And when he got me alone, he said, I think Scott died by suicide too. And I said, well, why do you think that? And he said, well, I was dropping him off at work that last day. And, he had been in recovery, and unbeknownst to us, he had relapsed. He was a heroin addict. He had relapsed, and before he got out of the car, he turned around and he gave me this stack of CDs, of 5 CDs. And he says, Dad, I really think you would enjoy these CDs. And he goes, it was like wrapped up in a rubber band. And he's like, he sat in the car and he pondered, he goes, this means something, what does it mean? And he watched his son go in the grocery store, and that was the last he ever saw of him alive. And he got the call later that his son had died by suicide. And I had to tell him, I said, I think you're right. So how many of the overdoses out there are suicides? I think a number of them, because the struggle with the heroin is so difficult. And then society is so judgmental for addiction in particular. So this was written on Charles's wall 4 days before he died. If I died, no one would notice at least a month. That's the exact thing that suicide list had, and it's isolated with nothing else. I was not his friend on Facebook, so I didn't see it. I was monitoring Twitter because I could. Somebody did send this to me, but about the day before he died. So I didn't even have time to look at it and figure out what it meant, because I'm thinking about where should he go next, how we're gonna pay for it, and all these other things. And then in the back of my mind, I'm thinking there must be something to this, but it just didn't click. This looked like something really, really bad. But you think, well, maybe he's hitting rock bottom and he's gonna turn things around. So you don't really know. Of course, he wasn't in the house at this time. He was, and I did tell the whole story in our newspaper article. He had gone to detox, he'd gone to rehab, and then he'd gone to sober house. He relapsed within 24 hours. So they took him back to detox, and he would only have had to stay there for 3 days, and he could come back to the sober house. And instead, he left with a friend, and for 2 weeks, we didn't know where he was. So that's why I didn't know what was going on at that point. I mean, we'd get intermittent texts, but we just didn't get a lot of information and not a lot of communication. A friend of mine, Pat Martin, lost her son 3 weeks later, and it was also a hanging. And he was in a work release program. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Yeah, well, that's like the perfect spot for somebody with paranoid schizophrenia, is a work release program in Chesterfield County, working at McDonald's, not getting treatment and being stabilized, but put in a work release program. He had done something, he'd had some petty theft, and I'm like, he's mentally ill. That's not where he needs to be. But of course, we don't have any control over that. I don't know if I'm going to make it. The rest of it says, this is going to my head. There are lots of rules, and I mess up one more time, I'm finished. I don't know. She thought that to mean that he wasn't going to be successful in the program. That's not what it meant. So how am I coping with the most devastating loss of my life? I will tell you, it's been tough. Support group was the first thing I did. Because I had been in a support group at Families Anonymous the last 4.5 years, I noticed that was helpful for getting my husband and myself on the same page. So we did that again, and we enrolled, and that was an excellent decision. It really helps you get past some of the emotional trauma and be in a group and deal with it at the same time other people are. We're still having technical difficulties, because I got a cute video on here. It's like 30 seconds.
I think our computer's dying.
Okay. Well, let me see if I can